What's up? Come on in, hit that like button, subscribe, support the channel. Hashtag Focus Daily TV. Here we go. Today we're going to delve into the history of American banking and how it applies to biblical prophecy. Here on Focus Daily TV show, that's exactly what we speak about, biblical prophecy, right here in America, and how those known as Afro-Americans, African Americans, are actually the children of God, which the Bible speaks of, Jerusalem and Israel. Unfortunately, due to the fact that we lost sight of the laws of God, the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, his son Christ, and the Holy Spirit, if we lost sight of his word and his laws, we found ourselves bound by this exact banking system that I speak of, the money changer, as the Bible refers to it as. Here we peep historical videos, and I chime in and try to bring the truth to light within the situation. I'm not going to do too much talking because I know everybody's time is precious, but we're going to get right on into it. Let's go. The history of banking. The First National Bank of America. Let's go.
In colonial America, there were no banks. During the Revolution, the Continental Congress printed huge amounts of currency, which led to rampant inflation. Thanks to that inflation, the Continentals were practically worthless by the time the war ended. But soon
Now, the Bible speaks about how gold and silver is mine, said the Lord. And this jumps straight into it. They immediately began to try to issue this form of fiat currency. But as you say, as they said on the video, it failed because central banking was never meant to be. Central banking is a product of Luciferians. It's a demonic product. The real form of currency is gold and silver. And ironically, those children of God that I speak of, they are that gold.
in colonial America, there were no banks. During the Revolution, the Continental Congress printed huge amounts of currency, which led to rampant inflation. Thanks to that inflation, the Continentals were practically worthless by the time the war ended. But soon after independence, banks were established, and Alexander Hamilton proposed a national bank.
A modern central bank does.
So the purpose of these banks was to pay off the Crown and the Vatican, which had sent their privateers, pirates, commonly known as pilgrims. You notice how they all start with a P. Over here in order to disenfranchise the people of this land. I know they speak about Columbus in 1492 and all of that. That ain't what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the late 1700s, early 1800s, when they officially began to conspire against us. This crafty council that the Bible speaks of.
Does things like issuing a common currency, determining the money supply, regulating depository institutions, and acting as a lender of last resort for banks that are facing temporary cash shortages or when financial.
Deuteronomy 28. At first we were the lenders, then we became the borrowers. At first we were the creditors, and then we became the debtors. Here it is right here.
Financial markets are disrupted.
It can also serve as a bank for its own government.
Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury, and his followers believed the new country needed a national bank. Did everybody want one?
We've got to have a national bank, and a strong one too. Our country's destined to become a capital of commerce.
Spoken like a...
No, everybody did not want one. But those commonly known as Masonic, quote unquote, Illuminati, I don't like using that word because that's too vague. We're getting straight to it. The First National Bank, presented to us by the Vatican, and the Crown of England.
A Yankee with a heavy purse, Ezra, my friend. Farming is the beating heart of this nation, and the bankers will squeeze that heart.
You're
till
like a horse with blinders on. You can't see but what's right in front of you.
It will favor the speculators.
It will
He's trying to tell you.
favor America, and all will prosper.
Too much power in too few hands, ripe for favoritism and corruption.
Alexander Hamilton championed the idea of a national bank in the United
That dude with the hat trying to tell you, Hamilton. Shit gonna get out of control with these banks.
States.
Others in the young government, including Thomas Jefferson, who would later be president, were very much against a national bank.
Jefferson said that since the Constitution did not explicitly grant Congress the power to establish a national
The question is, why were they so against this national central banking system? Maybe perhaps because, number one, God's will was being done, but number two, they knew the attitude and the temperature of these people who were trying to introduce this banking system to a charter that was only created for the purpose of business and trade.
bank. Such a bank would be unconstitutional. Hamilton had a looser interpretation of the Constitution.
Like in a slang type of way, code type of way, you can kind of switch Constitution with the Bible, the real Constitution.
Congress may do what is necessary to the end for which the Constitution was adopted, provided it is not repugnant to the natural rights of man, or to those which they have expressly reserved to themselves, or to the powers which are assigned to the states.
Hamilton and his supporters argued that there were some really solid reasons for establishing a national bank.
Like what?
Like, as a way for the federal government to finance its Revolutionary War debts. Also, to create a more uniform paper currency and to expand the availability of
To finance its conspiracy to disenfranchise the people of this land. Eventually, all of this banking led to being bound, becoming bondmen and bondwomen, making it possible for the selling of men's souls on the market. This is all biblical.
credit nationwide.
In the end, Hamilton's interpretation of the Constitution won out. In 1791, George Washington signed the bill that created the Bank of the United States. The bank was chartered for 20 years. It opened in Philadelphia, then other branches opened in port cities.
So initially, this wasn't even meant to last. But somehow, some way, they kept on coming with funky ass banks every single day. Fast forward to 2024, we are all indebted and bound by these banking institutions from birth, from when your parents signed that deed known as a birth certificate. Since we became reclassified as black or nothing, dead under the law, rather than Israel and Jerusalem, who we truly are as a people.
The bank was owned partly by the federal government and partly by private investors. It was by far the largest financial institution in the U.S. at the time.
This was the government's bank, or as many people say, the government's fiscal agent. It received the government's revenues, held its deposits.
So the question is, where are he getting these ideals of banking from? Obviously, banking is not an original concept. It was introduced to this land for the sole purpose of bonding men and bonding women.
And made its payments. It was also a bank for the public, accepting deposits from and making loans to businesses and individuals.
Unlike modern central banks, the Bank of the United States did not officially set monetary policy, and it didn't regulate other banks. Yet, because the bank was big and had branches
So basically, it was just another corporate entity. It didn't have no actual control. But suddenly now the Federal Reserve controls the ins and outs and the this ones and that ones of the world. But the It started off with these not so humble beginnings.
In several cities, it influenced the whole country's economy. In fact, it was so influential that a change in its lending policies affected the lending practices of state-chartered banks, and that affected the availability of credit nationwide.
Even after the first Bank of the United States had been around for 20 years, arguments over whether we should even have a national bank were still very much alive.
Congress was still evenly split on whether or not such a bank was needed, or even constitutional. And in 1811,
the way God's will work is he attempts to influence people. Of course, man has free will of whether he'll follow his laws, his word, and his command, i.e., the reason why black people find themselves in the situation we in as debtors instead of creditors, who we actually are. He attempted to influence people to do the right thing. So that's what they mean when they say Congress was debating over it. In their heart, they knew that this was wrong. But once again, that crafty council came through with the intent and purpose of conspiring and disenfranchising the indigenous people of this land.
the bank's charter failed to be renewed.
No more national bank, at least for a little while.
And then came the Federal Reserve. You see that shit right there? All right. Focus Daily TV, I appreciate y'all tuning in. More information soon to come. But until next time, hit that like button, man. Subscribe. Support the channel. #Focus Daily TV. We out.